Welcome to another Down the Rabbit Hole video. I'm doing a video response here. Interestingly, Weebob did a little question, not really a question. He was talking recently about the joy of video games, how that was sort of providing him with a much needed distraction from real life. And he had some very good points to bring up, both about playing old games on his main machine, for example, like he was playing Robotron. And he talked about what a joy that was, how it was a nice, basic, simple game that you could play. There's no storyline, there's no storyline, but it's a straightforward arcade game, Coin Muncher, that he was getting a lot of pleasure out of. He also talked about Red Dead Redemption 2 being a really big game that was also giving him a much needed break from reality, and his perspective, or the question that he was kind of posing was, gaming, how does it bring you joy? How much of it is modern gaming? How much of it is old gaming? Any kind of gaming, even board games and stuff. And he sort of threw that out for anybody to comment, so I'm going to do so. And I'm actually going to do it a little bit like a Friday foursome, because I got 4 points that I want to bring up for this. And that'll be kind of good because Weebob and I have done the Friday foursome a few times, so this will be like the old days. And there was something Weebob mentioned a while ago. He was talking about how my channel has got quite a lot of views. I mean, I don't have a lot of subscribers, but I got a lot of views. And what I wanted to kind of point out, and it's something people have asked me about, is hardly any of my video game things are top chart numbers. Like, most of the stuff that I've done on my channel, which is random, whatever occurs to me at the time, the stuff that's been getting the most views has nothing to do with video games, and yet I keep doing video game content. Like my last one, which was a sort of Atari Game Boy thing. So why do I keep... I've had, like, my sister was asking, why do you keep doing the Atari stuff? Who cares about that? Why don't you do your other things that people seem more interested in? And it's because, hence the title of this video, gaming brings me joy. Both modern and old. And I wanted to explain why, because I got 4 points that explain it. And so that's why I keep doing video game stuff, even though it doesn't get the views of all the other weird random stuff that I do. So I guess the thing that really stood out to me about Weebob's video, and I'll link to it below, and he would like other people to comment or make some kind of reply as well. He got talking about how there are some games that take you out of your moment, sort of transformative stuff that then makes you visit another world or experience things. I mean, Red Dead Redemption is set in the Wild West, so it's not like that's another planet, but it is a time and a place that we don't live in. So it is transformative. It is like being in another world. So, okay, so my 4 points. Let's get to those first. Why do I like gaming? Why does gaming bring me joy? And is it old games? Is it new games? Is it a little bit of both? Where's my split? So point number 1 is I was there from the beginning. I remember my very first time seeing a video game. I've talked about this before, actually. I saw Space Invaders in 1979, and it blew me away. It was like, wait a minute, you can move a thing around on a TV screen? Like, just with a control panel? What magic is this? And I remember way back in the 70s and early 80s, like, the incredible experience it was. Even just an old, crummy black and white game like Tank, or some of those really early submarine games, they look very rudimentary by today's standard, but anytime I see those, if I'm at a retro event, or if I'm playing it on my main machine, I'm just like, I remember what that was like in its era, when that was an incredible thing. I remember once praying to get onto a lunar lander machine, and hoping nobody was going to watch because I was terrible at it. But just that ability to land a little excursion module on the planet, on the surface of the moon. Wow. Like that was just incredible. And even to this day, when I play stuff, either old arcade games on my main machine, or else if I'm playing, like on the Vectrex is very good for that art style and that look of a vector display that you don't get anymore. That reminds me, that takes me back to what it was like to be there from day one, to see video games in their most primordial form. And I love revisiting that. That's why I do so much Atari stuff. I remember as a kid flicking on the game for the first time and just like, wow, I've got this new thing that I can experience. And I've got the joystick all good to go. This isn't really an Atari joystick. You get the general gist of it though. So for me personally, it is a trip down memory lane of I remember being there in the original incarnation of video games, both in the arcade and eventually in the home situation. We had a Pong machine very first. It's like, wow. So that's one of the reasons why for me gaming brings me joy, because it reminds me, it's sort of yeah, I was there at the beginning of it and here we are where it is now. Holy crap. My second point is a little bit still in the history of gaming, and I can't really come up with a good analogy. I guess imagine if you love music and home stereo systems. This is about the best equivalent I can come up with. If you're one of those audiophiles who loved the sound of music coming from a record, an LP, off a platter, and then in the 80s along comes the CD and how it's so much better now, and you never get a scratch and you don't have to worry about flipping the disc over halfway through. The time that must have been for audiophiles is similar to what I experienced in the sort of 83, 84, when here in North America we had the big crash. I remember going to arcades that were dead or dying, and how sad that was. And a lot of people I knew who had moved on from video games, it was the fad, and now we're all into Sony Walkmans and stuff like that. And I remember, like, I went into places to play video games, and it's like, this is really run down and kind of a sad ghost of what it used to be. I actually did a video. I went to Playland, which is our local amusement park with rides and roller coasters and stuff. They had an arcade there back in the day. It's still there today, and it's pretty sad looking. There's a beat up old Tron, doesn't work. There's a lot of machines that are just dying. That is a thing that was happening in 83, 84. I would go into arcades looking for that joy that I used to get from playing Pac-Man or whatever. And I'd look at it as like, ooh, this is not, many of the machines have got the classic, not in service sticker hanging off them. And there was a lot of sketchy characters hanging around. I was just like, oh, I don't like this, but I still love video games. And a lot of people were like, you're crazy. And this is where the whole audiophile thing, if you're somebody who loved albums, records on big, 12-inch not floppy disks, but 12-inch discs, I'm sure similarly people must have looked at you like you were crazy when CDs came out and said, why are you still listening to LPs? Why are you still getting records? The technology has moved on. You're crazy to love that old thing. And then 10, 20 years ago, there seems to have been this revival. There seems to be among the real music aficionados this desire of like, no, LPs have a certain warm sound to them, and, vacuum tube stereo amplifiers have got a much improved classical feeling and sound to them compared to the modern digital stuff. And there is a respected sort of part of that community now. I feel like, as somebody who loved video games when they were no longer popular, when the resurgence came back, now you see kids walking around with Pac-Man and Space Invaders t-shirts and Atari t-shirts and stuff. And you're just like, hey, that's cool. I had to weather the storm of when they were not popular. And that's a feeling of Renaissance enjoyment for me. It's like I was there in the original back in the day, and I weathered the storm of when they weren't popular. We got a computer It was an Apple II clone in 1984, 85. And we had the excuse, or we were pretending to ourselves, oh, it's for homework and productivity. No, it was so I could play games. I played tons of games on that machine. That's what it was. I had no longer, the Atari was too long in the tooth at that point. I was playing computer games. I got my own 286 back in the early 90s because I wanted to play computer games. I played computer games pretty much for a whole decade. Then I got an IT job where I was in front of a computer all day, so the last thing I wanted to do when I got home was to play on a computer anymore. So I got a console, I got a Wii, and the rest is history. And so I feel my second reason that video games have given me joy over all this time is I went through it all. I remained sort of dedicated to it, and a sign of commitment. I went with this thing that gave me passions for so long, and through warts and all, it has improved, and now it's the belle of the ball. Now everybody loves video games. I keep hearing people on the news, newscasters are like, oh yes, I played video games when I was a kid. Sure, you did. Anyway, whatever. Reason number 3. They hold up. In the 2000s, a friend of mine showed me MAME, and I was like, wait a minute, I can play Galaxian for free on my computer. Like if I download MAME and get it all set up, I can play Galaxian, the original. Holy crap. And that was great. And I discovered those games are still good. I mean, compared to the stuff that was on the PlayStation 1, I guess at that time, I was just like, yeah, those are cool. Your sort of Metal Gear Solids are all not awesome and stuff, but that's really convoluted and stuff. There is a lot to be said for the classic Space Invaders, Pac-Man, Donkey Kong era. They are still very valid gaming experiences to this day. I would say it's almost like if you were, say, somebody who loved the Beatles or Elvis or The Who or whatever, and you listen to them today and you're like, you know what? That's still a good song. Decades later, it is still good. And that to me is what is a great appeal with the old games, is that they still hold up. They're still awesome. Now, point number 4 is to kind of lean into when Bob was saying how, is it old games or is it new games or is it a little bit of both? Where is your joy? Modern games are so good. They are so good. I mean, the stuff that I have played, for example, the Assassin's Creed series, especially 3, and then, I haven't played 4, Syndicate in Victorian England. I played the death out of that thing. And there are many games like that, where it's like, I have been so enthralled by what's happened and investigated this huge world, even if it's not an open world game, even if it's just a straightforward adventure. Like I did the Tomb Raider reboot, where Lara Croft sort of depicted a lot more realistically. That's an adventure game as opposed to an open world game. But I was just like, man, this is really compelling, and it draws you in, and you're with that character. And I've especially my wife, we both had this experience at the end of it where it's like, okay, I've unlocked all the trophies, I've done all the stuff I want to do. It's time to take out that disc and put it away. And like, I'm feeling really sad. This is the end of the experience with this game. There are many more games out there, but that is something. If I could tell my younger self that games will exist with entire open cities, both medieval and modern and futuristic, with lots of people walking around, and you can talk to them and you can go into their houses and you can do stuff and you can root around in their fridge and then you can get into a car or a flying vehicle and just take off. That kind of thing was very like it's a way in which games are huge now, and you can do so much in them. They are almost as good as pen and paper role-playing games, where the sky's the limit. I mean, in the hands of a really good referee, DM, whatever, Dungeons and Dragons, my own Star Frontiers campaign, and various others, Gamma World, if you got a good referee running the campaign, the level of scrutiny, like you can needle down right down to what's inside this tin can in a role-playing game. The sky's the limit. You can talk to any character and interact, and they've got their own lives, and then things are going on. And now video games have reached a close parody to that, parody, whatever, equivalent, where it's like you are almost at that same level of you can go into every house and you can talk to every character and you can go and, go on this quest, or you can go and find these things. Fallout 3, that's a huge, expansive world with lots of people to talk to and go and do things and experience that post-apocalyptic world with those mutants and those weapons and all that kind of, that scenario. Really impossible to explain to gamers of a bygone era, like, there's going to be a time when that's possible. I talked about this when I did Wipeout on PSVR, that there's a guy who is a big local Canadian video game journalist, celebrity guy. He made a comment about Wipeout in PSVR that I just thought, yes, that's the thing. That's it. He said, playing that game in VR is probably what we imagined video games of the future will be. And he's right. That feeling of being in those flying cars and racing around and looking everywhere and just in it, that's the kind of thing that, like, modern gaming provides a channel, an outlet of something that we just dreamed of back in the day. It's possible now, and it's really good. So those are my 4 reasons why gaming, both modern and old gaming, bring me joy. I want to kind of finish off with a very specific recommendation to Wee Bob. He talked about how he loves Red Dead Redemption. You go into the town, you finish, you collected the bounty and stuff, and now you can just sort of chill and sit in this old-timey Western bar and just watch the sunset out the window, that kind of thing. He loves that. And he also has PSVR because he talked about Astrobot. I've got 2 recommendations for you, Wee Bob, that will do exactly what you're talking about. One, I haven't played myself for reasons. That is, Skyrim is available in VR. That is a huge open world, and it has those moments of, like, I've heard there are people who just play Skyrim in VR so they can sit in the tavern and just watch people come and go, and the fire's running and stuff like that. They're just drinking their mead or whatever. I'd kind of like to do that. There's stuff about Skyrim VR that I am avoiding. There's some big beasties in that game that kind of jump out at you down in the caverns and that. And I don't like big, nasty stuff. In VR, it can be a little too much for me. So I will recommend it for you, Wee Bob. Try out Skyrim when it's on sale. The other one, though, I've talked about this enough times, and I keep coming back to this. That's No Man's Sky. Wow. This game is what I think gaming... It's not even... Oh man, how can I even do this right? How can I do this proper justice? I've experienced those moments you've talked about, Wee Bob, in this game, and they have been a real escape and a release and a moment of pure pleasure in a way that not a lot of other games deliver. I've talked about this before. I'll give you a few examples. You're just flying around, and it's a crafting game, I guess, for lack of a better description. You go places, you get resources, and you build stuff. There's a story, and it's a very good story. I really like the story in there. They've now expanded upon it 1,000,000 times. There's like little expeditions you can do now. But outside of all that stuff, just the game in general, there have been a handful of moments in that game that just... they hit me the same way you did. You got hit by Red Dead Redemption. There was a time that I was on a mission. I had to go to find this thing in this cavern, I think, or in this building. And unfortunately, a storm was rolling in, and it was going to do a lot of damage to me. So I was like, okay, storms don't last very long, so I'll just sit here in my ship, and I'll wait for the storm to pass. And it did. But as it did, the sun rose in the distance over the ocean, and I was watching a sunrise on an alien planet from my spaceship. And it was one of those sort of cinematic things, and the music is gorgeous. And I was just like, I know I'm in this VR headset. I know this is all a construct. But I feel like I'm doing this for real. I feel like I'm really in a spaceship on an alien world, and there's this sunrise. It's incredible. Another one that I did, again, storms to be blamed for this. I was building something, and a storm was rolling in, and I didn't have a close-by shelter, so there was a cave, and I was like, all right, I'll just go hide in the cave, because if you're in a cave, then you are protected from whatever weather rolls in. So I was like, all right, fine. And I'm sitting there waiting for the storm to pass, and I look down, and I was like, oh, this cave goes down, and then there's a pool of water at the bottom, and I could scan, there's some kind of a creature swimming around in there. I was like, that's really cool. I wouldn't have thought of looking down there, and I just happened, like, that's a moment of, like, you know, this wasn't planned, this wasn't choreographed, this wasn't written down or orchestrated. It just happened organically. Was once on the run from the Sentinels, and I fell accidentally down into a cave similarly. Sentinel couldn't get in, so he's kind of waiting for me, and I burrowed out the other side, and I managed to get back to my spaceship. And it was like, that's like something from a movie. That's like a storyline beat that you would get in a sci-fi movie. It just happened organically. And just this past week, I'll finish off here. My final recommendation. Just this past week, I was finishing off some stuff, and I was flying back to, I've got a freighter, a big sort of, Battlestar Galactica type ship. I was landing in there, and you can also have traders will also land merchants. They'll come in sometimes, and they'll land, and they'll want to sell you stuff, and you're like, yeah, I'm good, thanks. I was approaching my ship, and, the tractor beam had taken over, and I was being coasted into my docking bay. And there was another ship right beside me. Just a merchant. He was just going to sell me some stuff. Nothing really major as far as the plot line. But I looked, and it had like the lens flare of his engines, and the music was so sort of not temperamental, sort of pastoral and quiet and calm. And I just felt like I'm here. I'm in this moment. I'm in this spaceship, and I'm landing. And it was so cool. And it was just like, it's no wonder I racked up over 300 hours in No Man's Sky, and I probably will rack up another 300 hours. The game is just this living world that goes on and on and on. And I listened to a podcast once where a guy was talking about it versus Elite Dangerous. Elite Dangerous is way better for graphics and for the storyline and stuff. But the guy was saying, honestly, No Man's Sky I prefer because they keep expanding on it, and it has this you can do anything element to it that Elite Dangerous is kind of missing. It's a little more scripted. That to me, a lot of VR titles. I've talked about Star Wars in VR, Squadrons, and Star Wars Pinball. I've got that too, we bought. Star Trek Bridge Crew. I still play that to this day. There are so many things in VR that are just transformative. So they give me joy. They give me that escapist pleasure that just... I still play Atari. I still play Genesis and Super NES and Vectrex. I still play the old stuff. I just did a Game Boy video, so clearly I still play old stuff. And those are great because of the nostalgia, and the games still hold up. And they have a certain clout today in popular culture. It's like, oh yeah, retro games, that's a thing. That's really cool. But I think, I would say it's a 50-50 split, maybe 60-40 for modern, because the VR stuff, I play way more of it. I'm there. I'm really experiencing it in a way that is just incredible. And I'm so happy. So I guess that answers Bob's question, and it's not really a question per se, but just like, how video games give me joy. And how much of it is modern, how much of it is old, and why, and... He even mentioned board games and card games, does that give you joy? I could have done a whole section about that too, because, I've done chess videos and a bunch of other board game stuff. I could go into that, but this video is getting long enough. So, I think I'm going to wrap it up there. I'm going to put a link down below to Bob's video, and yeah, if anybody else wants to do a video response like this, or just comment on this video, he would very much appreciate it. Until next time, we'll see you down the rabbit hole.